Hey folks, my name is Pravus, and welcome to more Plague Inc. Evolved, where we are continuing our Mega Brutal Guide series. And today we have landed on the Parasite, which is personally one of my least favorite disease types. The Parasite gets less DNA from normal infections, which means you have a lot less DNA to work with over the course of the game, so it's harder to get enough of your strong symptoms and lethal symptoms toward the end of the game. To counteract this effect a little bit, the Parasite does get extra DNA from orange bubbles, but it's nowhere near enough to make up for the deficit, and it also does start with a healthy amount of severity even if you don't have any symptoms evolved. That severity is intended to put some pressure on you as the player to then pick up the Parasite's special ability called Symbiosis, which reduces the severity and helps you fly under the radar and not get detected. But if you've been paying attention to these Mega Brutal guides, you know that severity is your friend. It can generate some extra DNA, which means we can't afford to reduce our severity. We have to keep it high in order to get enough DNA to even stand a chance at this game. That means that the Parasite is basically just a harder, worse version of the bacteria, which is not especially fun, but you know, that's what you get to work with. As far as our genetic code, we're going to go for the ATP boost just for the early jump start. We're going to go for Darwinist because this can come in clutch at a key moment, and then Aquasite, Extremophile, and Symptostasis are standard picks, and they work just fine here as well. This will be called Spotty Panic. Sure, why not? I think it sounds great. Starting in Saudi Arabia, we're going to go for the rash and the sweating, and unsurprisingly work toward the skin lesions. Now, the symptom build order is actually going to be slightly different here because, as I said, since we are generating less DNA, we do need to be pretty intentional about what we end up picking up. So normally here, I would go for the coughing, and then I'd want to go for the sneezing because it's a very, very good symptom. However, sneezing does not lead to anything that I need for lethality by the end of the game, whereas I do need to get pneumonia, and that can eventually lead toward total organ failure. So while it's still worth getting coughing and pneumonia, I'm going to have to skip out on sneezing, even though I normally would really like it, because that extra infectivity is nice to hit critical mass and get around to different countries, but I'm not going to get extra DNA from infecting more people quickly in the game. Therefore, the math has changed. The timing has changed with the Parasite. I will, however, still pick up something like the Cysts. This is a little bit cheaper at 2 DNA, and it's going to lead to something called hypersensitivity. I do find with this particular strategy I will show you that getting into the rich countries is especially tough, so the hypersensitivity is going to help with that just a little bit. It's a poor man's drug resistance. Not nearly good enough, but it's going to help get me going at least until I can afford, eventually, drug resistance level 2. We will still pick up the Paranoia, and this is where I'm going to stop with the symptoms for the moment. Now we can move back over to transmissions, and I do need to get some air and some water transmission, especially since I just saw that there is a water sterilization technique which is going to cause a bit of a problem. Now, strictly speaking, we don't need to get Extreme Bioaerosol. It would be nice, but we do not need to get Extreme Bioaerosol in this particular run. We can roll the dice and pray that we get on a ship that eventually does take us to Greenland, since Greenland is still very much the troublemaker. We could also skip air entirely here. We don't have to go for air level 2. I've seen some strategies that just omit this entirely. I will still pick it up because that little bit of extra infectivity can make a difference getting into a few places like, let's say, New Zealand, which otherwise would shut you down. I also do want to get into Europe a little bit faster, but do be aware that that is an option too. This is optional, this is optional. That would save you somewhere on the order of 40 DNA over the course of the game. Therefore, you'll have a bit more gas to work with when you need total organ failure, if you can even get to that point. And that's kind of the trick. Can you at least get to the point where you can afford to skip some of these? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. There's a particular strategy that was a little bit popular on Reddit to get a 5-star run with the Parasite here. That is actually a very good run. I've done it before, but it does require specific mutations to even have a chance with the Parasite, specifically getting to things like dysentery. And I don't really like runs that rely on getting a specific mutation by a certain time in the game. I just find that that is not especially great. So that's why I'm going for a more generalist strategy, but going for 5 stars with the Parasite does require a ton of luck. Now, I did go for some drug resistance to help in places like Europe and eventually the United States and Canada, cold resistance for the reasons that you are used to, and will also pop into things like pneumonia and hypersensitivity. So for a fairly cheap price, we've just boosted up our ability to infect rich nations and cold nations pretty dramatically. I do need to get drug resistance level 2, but the question is, can I afford to do that early? Do I want to do that early? Because think about it, if I'm already in Europe, right, do I need to infect and hit critical mass in this nation earlier? And the answer is no, you actually don't. Because if you do, you're just making the genetic drift worse for you. I'm already in the country. As long as I have just enough infectivity that I can get to all the neighbors, I don't really need to go for drug resistance level 2. I will by the time that I go for the lethal phase, but not necessarily during the infection phase. Instead, we're going to go for a couple levels of genetic hardening, and then we're going to sit back and we're going to wait and pray. Pray that we do get a boat from Russia into Greenland. We'll see what ends up happening here. Or Norway. You know, Norway can work as well. Norway does have a boat that gets into Greenland. It's not half bad. The islands that typically will mess you up here is going to be the Caribbean. If you've infected Mexico, though, it's not usually that bad. New Zealand, the Philippines can mess you up here, but of course, it's always going to come down to gosh dang Greenland. There's just no way around it. Now, they have started working on that cure. We bought ourselves some time with the genetic hardening. That's great. Is it going to be enough? Really just depends on Russia. If we're lucky, by now, we absolutely can have a boat that gets sent over there. The question is, do we want that? Now, necrosis, I will go ahead and devolve here. I almost want this. Almost. By the time that we get to, let's say, 30% cure progress, you would want it. I'm literally buying myself precious seconds to get away from Russia and get into Greenland. Unfortunately, I just noticed that Iceland shut down early and we never got a plane over there, which means we're gonna have to restart. It's unfortunate, but okay, we'll go ahead and just give this one another go. We end up having a very similar spread to what we had before, largely the same thing here. We're just waiting to see if we can get lucky and actually have a boat go where we need it to go this time around. I just saw a boat go into Greenland, but it wasn't the right one, therefore, ouch, that sucks. Oh well, we'll see what happens. Come on, we just need to get into Greenland and Iceland. There's Iceland this time, all right, so now what we're missing is the Caribbean and Greenland. Once we get that, we go hard into the lethality phase. So please, Russia, work with me. Nausea is fine. The Caribbean is done. It's all going to come down to Greenland right now. The question is, can we afford... There it is! All right. So the second we see that happen, it's time for necrosis. It's time for pulmonary fibrosis. It's time for total organ failure. Now, the good news is, because I did not go for drug resistance level 2, we have not fully infected the USA and Europe, which means these populations are not contributing much to the genetic drift. I've even had a test game where I barely infected China, and that's 1.5 billion people not contributing, and therefore the total organ failure only costs somewhere around like 30 DNA, which is obviously pretty huge. But now we have to go for drug resistance level 2. If we do not, we will not be able to spread fast enough to kill in Europe, in the United States, and in Canada in order to slow down the cure and actually have a chance of winning this. Beyond this, though, this is where things are looking pretty good. We're just missing Sweden as far as countries. Eventually, we'll get in there from land transmission. What we need now is just to slow down the cure. That means we need to go for things like the coma if we can. We might be able to get to things like insanity, but this is where things get extra difficult because if we had not taken the exact route that I did, if total organ failure had cost its typical 50 or 60 DNA, we would be sunk right now because we simply do not have enough DNA to keep this all going. I am relying on lethality to now give me the gas that I'm going to need in order to get the rest of the symptoms and have a chance at winning. The timing of this really does get bad. Less DNA from being able to infect people is a huge hindrance. I have had games where I've tried this, I couldn't even get the total organ failure, and then we just lost as a result, because I could not get enough lethality to even keep things going. But now we're in a really good shape. As long as Sweden is able to get infected, which it looks like it is still infecting faster than anything else, we'll be all right. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and speed this along. This is urban. Therefore, we're going to go ahead and grab some rodents to try and get a little bit of extra infectivity going here. Otherwise, it's going to ruin my score. And then we're just going to go for things like some genetic reshuffles and try to buy myself a few extra points. Sweden is really holding out here, though. We've got our cold resistance. We've kind of got all the modifiers we can. It's just that our lethality is high enough. We're really struggling with this. In fact, they just bombed their infected cities. Well, that's rude, but okay. So we're going to get a worse score here just because this slowed things down kind of dramatically, but we did at least buy enough time to get all of the genetic reshuffles. Therefore, the cure got below 50%. So we are going to see just what the damage is here. What kind of a score am I ultimately looking at? You can, by the way, just, go ahead and evolve a few other random things here if you want to, like let's say immune suppression. It's an option for you. The more complex your disease is, the better your score is. You don't have to sit on the DNA. So it really is up to you. But there we go. So we finished that and we did indeed get 4 stars. 436 days is actually not half bad, especially since we weren't relying on mutation in order to get us the extra symptoms we need. Only 45% cure progress, almost 50,000 points. I call that a pretty decent Parasite run. But again, like if I had waited any longer, if I had waited anywhere past 30% cure progress before getting necrosis, we would not have been able to get enough DNA to get the total organ failure, which would have meant we would have lost the game. That's why I do things differently here, and I do a different set of symptoms, and I do not go for drug resistance level 2 until I'm ready to pull that trigger. We do not want to unnecessarily infect people because there's no benefit in doing so as the Parasite. It's a little weird, but if you follow this strategy, it typically does work. Thank you all for watching. I hope you found this video entertaining and informative as you continue your mega brutal journey in Plague Inc. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, hit that notify bell, and I will see you guys next time.